Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Brandon Perdomo, and we're live here from, I think we're all in New York City right now. And this is the second episode of the webinar series by the World Peace Prayer Society called Local Peace Talks. And if you haven't joined us previously, not last month, 5 months ago, our first webinar was in May. This format really is to bridge communities within the NGO sector, across to the UN and across the civil society, offering just direct line of communication on what people's organizations are about, what initiatives are active right now in terms of world peace, ecology, creative endeavors, and anything in between. And here with me today, I have two very special guests that have been supporters of the World Peace Prayer Society, that have complemented events with the World Peace Prayer Society, and that have have been huge community figureheads in terms of world peace, not only local, but absolutely international, which you'll come to have a grasp of. And so here, first of all, I'd like to introduce Bruce Knotts. And I'm just gonna give a little bit about Bruce. Bruce Knotts has worked in Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, and Somalia before joining the Department of State in 1984. Bruce served in Greece, Zambia, India, Pakistan, Kenya, Sudan, Cote d'Ivoire, and the Gambia as Deputy Chief of Mission. Bruce was Regional Refugee Coordinator for West Africa, working closely with several UN special reps from 2000 to 2003. Bruce retired from Foreign Service in 2007 and began directing the Unitarian Universalist United Nations Office in 2008. Bruce speaks on various topics at venues around the world, including recently in the US, Canada, Mexico, China, Republic of Korea, Ghana, the Philippines, Taiwan, and Vietnam. Bruce is co-chair of the UN NGO Committee on Human Rights, the chair of the NGO Committee on Disarmament, Peace and Security, a member of the NGO UN Security Council Working Group, and he chairs the NGO DPI Executive Committee, which represents 1,400 DPI affiliated NGOs at the UN. Thank you so much, Bruce, for being here with us today.
It's great to be with you. Thank you so much. It really was that the time that I worked in the Foreign Service and worked with refugees, and I was working with Sierra Leonean and Liberian refugees in West Africa, and I saw the devastation of those civil wars in those two countries, and saw the refugees and experienced what they went through. One of the stories that I tell often is that I saw some refugees who had just fled a village that had been attacked. I saw this woman with two small children, and I asked her, I said, "How old are your children?" And she said, "They're not my children. When the attack happened at our village, they were running around screaming and afraid, so I took them to safety. I hope somebody did the same for my children," she said. And that's what war is all about, and that's why we need to stop it. The NGO Committee on Disarmament, Peace, and Security was founded by a Unitarian Universalist minister, Homer Jack, in 1970. And I am proud to follow in that tradition and also lead the Unitarian Universalist Office at the United Nations and working for peace.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that. Anytime anybody shares, what spark of humanity in such a dark place, where that inspires them, that continues the ripple effect in our communities too. So we're so lucky to have you here, Bruce. Anytime that I see you speak at the UN, it's always a highlight for me.
Oh, thank you.
And Rick Ulfik, the great Rick Ulfik. He is a founder of We the World and the We campaign at we.net, a global coalition building nonprofit community which annually connects and promotes thousands of socially conscious organizations and businesses to amplify their efforts and generate public awareness and action. Rick is the co-creator of the annual 11 Days of Global Unity, September 11th through September 21st, the International Day of Peace. Launched by We the World and global partners in 2004, it's become a worldwide platform for change makers with as many as 700 associated events in over 60 countries. Participants have included Desmond Tutu, Jane Goodall, Deepak Chopra, Daniel Ellsberg, Marianne Williamson, Bill McKibben, Eve Ensler, Ralph Nader, Arun Gandhi, and many others. Rick has also been a nonviolent communicator, workshop facilitator, and leader. Rick, thank you so much for coming here and joining us today.
It's great to be on with you and Bruce. This is a fabulous gathering that you've put together, Brendan.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much. And so We the World just celebrated its 20th anniversary. Is that true?
Yes, it's amazing how time goes by. And, you know, I founded We the World in 1998. And so many things have happened since then. But since Bruce shared a little bit about, you know, what motivated him, I could say that one of the big reasons that I started We the World was because I found that I had a music career, actually a 35-year music career for decades, you know, writing music for TV and film and commercials and the Olympics and all kinds of things. And I used to contribute to organizations that I thought were creating a better world, you know, like Amnesty International and Greenpeace and Southern Poverty Law Center and National Organization for Women and other groups. And then in the 1990s, it didn't seem like it was becoming a better world, you know, and I thought, well, maybe I can do something myself to kind of get involved and take action in some way. And I started volunteering with a bunch of NGOs and nonprofit organizations. And one thing that I noticed as a kind of running theme in the meetings that I was attending, people were saying, well, we're doing good work, but why are we doing it in isolation? Why aren't we working more collaboratively with others? And why is this whole movement so fragmented? And that, along with some other factors, eventually led to me starting We the World, which is really meant to bring together change makers and organizations so they can do together what they can't do on their own.
Thank you so much. And I know across the globe, organizations making strives for peace are put on literally on your map. And this platform's available for anybody annually to participate in events and community affairs concerning the same thing in their own way, peace.
Exactly. Actually, I could talk more about that if you want.
Sure.
So one of the ways that we foster collaboration is by providing resources that are kind of like shared resources. And a big one, which you were kind of indicating, is what we call the Global Unity Calendar. And it's a free, public, international calendar that organizations and individuals can post their events and activities to from around the world. And, you know, you can access this and the other resources that we have at we.net. It's all about we.
Thank you. And just so anybody watching, and I know participants are coming in right now to view this webinar as we are live. And I just want to remind everybody that this is a platform where you can come in, chime in, ask any questions, and we're here for you. We're here presenting for you. And so I'd like to move around, just asking both of you, Bruce first, how you began your work, which is spread through so many limbs of service, and what really inspired the beginnings of this.
Well, I mentioned in my introduction that Reverend Homer Jack in the early 1970s, actually 1970 itself, founded the NGO Committee on Disarmament, Peace, and Security. And the focus of the committee at the time was the abolition of nuclear weapons, which is something the committee continues to advocate for. I hope everybody knows that there has been a Security Council, a General Assembly resolution with over 130 countries voting in favor of the total abolition of nuclear weapons on the planet. The countries that didn't vote for that are the nuclear weapons possessing states, and they're making it very difficult to move forward on this. We are actually working with the mission of Austria to the UN on October 16th to have a discussion, and some other countries are joining. I know Thailand has joined, and some other countries. And we have not had serious negotiations on the abolition of nuclear weapons in at least 20 years. And it's high time, particularly with the tensions in North Korea, in Iran, and Crimea. You know, the threat of nuclear war is higher now than it's been for a long time. And we really should have substantive discussions about getting rid of these weapons, at least reducing them, controlling them in ways to make sure that they're never used. The other thing that I brought to the committee was my experience in West Africa as a refugee coordinator. And what I saw was the devastation done to communities and to people by small arms. These were handguns, these were pistols, these were rifles, these were conventional arms. Both Liberia and Sierra Leone were blessed with vast deposits of diamonds. And they had tremendous amounts of wealth that they generated from these diamonds. This wealth could have built hospitals and schools and infrastructure and really developed the two countries. Instead, the money was used to buy weapons, and civil wars came out of that, and it was huge devastation. So what should have been a blessing to these countries turned into a catastrophe. And the small arms industry is largely to blame. And the largest producers of small arms are the permanent 5 members of the Security Council, which makes it very difficult to move that forward. But there was the ATT treaty, the Small Arms Treaty, that did pass the UN. It is not all that I would like it to be, but it begins the process of trying to control the spread of small arms. And that's something too that I think that we need to push forward. And just one last word on this. Small arms, of course, is creating devastation in this country, in our cities. The United States is by far the most armed country in the world. We have more arms in the hands of citizens, people around the country. We are unique in defending the right for every individual to bear arms. And the arms that we're defending for people to bear are automatic or semi-automatic weapons of military type. We're not talking about hunting rifles. We're not talking about, you know, the arms of old, but we're talking about weapons that have been used in recent devastating shootings in Las Vegas, in schools, around the country, which have killed children. And we really need to control small arms in this country, but also globally. And the United States is not the only country that has this problem. Brazil has an equally high murder rate as we do, and other countries suffer from this as well. So we need to control all arms and make sure that they cannot harm the people that they are.
Thank you, Bruce. One of my favorite symbols of disarmament is located right in front of the United Nations. The structure of the gun, the pistol, for anybody who hasn't seen, it's a pistol with the barrel tied together in a knot.
It's a gift from the government of Luxembourg, small country in Europe. It's probably the most photographed item in the UN. It's right there, as you know, at the very entrance, and everybody stands in front of it. It really does symbolize why the United Nations is there. And it's a beautiful monument to disarmament. And you also, of course, have the biblical passages about turning swords into plowshares. And that's really what we should be doing, turning our weapons into schools and hospitals and highways, and much more productive things than killing each other.
Thank you. Actually, I'm just going to pull up the image of the gun right here.
There it is.
Yeah, that was one of the first sites that I passed when I first went to the UN for the International Day of Peace as a kid in high school. And we spoke, well, we didn't speak, but we saw Jane Goodall present and Dr. Elie Wiesel present, and a whole panel of celebrities and peacemakers from the UN, to international popular symbols, and they were talking about what we're here today to promote. And it's just so important for symbols to prevail and for endeavors to really be recognized. And so thank you for indulging with us. And okay, so Rick.
Yes.
I
think you have to stop your screen share, right?
How do I stop the screen share?
I think you just, yeah, you got it.
There we are. Okay, so Rick, how did you begin your work?
Sure. I mentioned that it kind of grew out of my being a musician and realizing that I guess in the 1990s, what good is a music career if the world is going down the tubes, So that was my impetus for getting involved. And I did want to comment on what Bruce was saying a bit also, because, one of our major themes with the 11 Days of Global Unity, which we'll talk about more, I guess, is disarmament. And with all of these issues like the nuclear threat, with nuclear weapons and small arms, that part of what we're doing, part of our strategy is to create a cultural shift so that the culture actually begins to think in a way that emphasizes the common good. We call it we consciousness. It's like expanding the circles of empathy and concern beyond ourselves, and to include not just our family and loved ones, but also our communities, and expanding beyond even beyond human beings to the whole web of life. but it's this expanding concept of we that we're promoting, along with coalition building, you know. So, and we'll maybe get into this a little bit more in detail. But in other
Rick,
words,
may I interrupt just a second? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah,
I just wanted to, this idea of changing culture, I think that's wonderful, and I really support that idea. I'm working with a Chinese student at Columbia University, and what he wants to do is develop games that promote peace. As you know, most like video games and computer games and whatever games we play are about conquering your enemies and killing your opponents, and that's how you win the game. And he wants to develop games that are fun and interesting, that young people or old people, everybody wants to play, that promote peace. So I fully support your idea of changing the culture, and sorry for the interruption.
no, not at all. But that's for us. This is key because, you know, you can try to push through legislation, and, you know, and we're seeing right now in the United States how things are so kind of polarized between two sides. So you have roughly half of the Congress, you know, on one side and half on the other side. So people who think, you know, well, if I just get a few more votes, then that's going to solve the problem. I don't believe that's true. I think we really need to begin to change the culture so we're all kind of on the same page, as opposed to, you know, us and them. And so, and I want to talk more about how that can work in detail, but I thought maybe this is a good opportunity to run the first video, which is called "Now is the Time for We." You know, the We the World video. Are you able to do that, Brendan?
Yes, absolutely. Just one moment while I get my screen sharing up and running again. Can we all see this?
Yes?
Okay. Oh, sorry. I hit the wrong button.
Oops.
So, you know which video to do?
Yes, yes, I have it right here. I'm just going to share from a different window.
Isn't it time we sing out as one?
We are in this together.
You have gifts that I don't have, and I have gifts that you don't have.
It's already begun. Now is the time that we help the world.
15 of whom are dying every minute from hunger and disease, melting so much faster than scientists had expected. The world spends $2 million per minute on militarism and war.
It's time for a shift. We together can make a major change, the kind of change that we must see. Now is the time for we.
Now is the time.
Now is the time for we, the world. We, the world.
I hope that everyone can join with We the World, because it's when we all get together that we will make the changes that we must make. We are the world.
Now is the time.
It's a beautiful video. Very nice. I appreciated your comments too about kind of the tribal nature of our politics. It wasn't too long ago that most people in America believed in climate change and wanted to do something about it. Now climate change has become a Democratic issue, and Republicans don't believe in climate change, and it's just tribal thinking. Same with peace. Peace tends to be a Democratic issue. Funding the military and supporting, you know, a bigger, stronger military is a Republican issue. And we've got to stop thinking this way. We've got to make peace, you know, everybody's issue, regardless of party. Combating climate change also needs to be something that we all do, and not get into our tribal silos and you know, fight with each other all the time.
Rick, one moment. I'm going to unmute you.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
I muted myself there and forgot to unmute myself. So yeah, I agree. And so part of the concept of the We campaign is to think about, to go down to below the level of partisanship, but to think about people just in terms of people and what people need, because we all have shared needs and values that everybody has, and it's that for political reasons, some politicians, you know, they find it easier to make to divide people, and so that there's like an us and a them. It's just expedient for them, and it makes it easy, but it's not what you know. We have so much more that unites people than what is different with people. So part of the idea of we is to do three things. We is a consciousness, as we were talking about. It's a collaboration and a campaign. So in terms of the consciousness, as I said, it's about expanding people's attitudes at an individual level and at a national sort of political policy level, to expand, to include the common good, to prioritize the common good. And then in terms of collaboration, We the World has been for over 15 years, and in fact, like Brandon said, we celebrated our 20th year. We've been building global networks of collaboration and action. So and we've been working with some of the largest networks in the world. I mentioned Amnesty International was one of the launch partners for 11 Days of Global Unity. But we've also worked with Oxfam and United Religions Initiative and you know, World Peace Prayer Society and many, many others, like thousands of organizations that are in our network. And so our goal is to create unprecedented cooperation and coordination between these organizations. Imagine if we had the largest transformative grassroots organizations actually working together to do things like move the dial on abolishing nuclear weapons, which is what Bruce was talking about, or even reforming the United Nations, which has a lot to do with why you know, we don't have, you know, unanimity with regard to abolishing nuclear weapons. So anyway, building this like global collaboration is something we've been working on actively, and we want to take that to the next level. And then the We as a campaign is taking all of these groups, working together and allowing them to take action within various kinds of areas of concern. So, for example, with 11 Days of Global Unity, which I can give a little bit of background about that. We brought together partners to launch 11 Days of Global Unity in 2004. It grew out of the International Day of Peace. The International Day of Peace was moving around. The date was actually moving around during the 1990s because it was set to be on the opening session of the General Assembly at the United Nations. But that opening session would sometimes be on the second Tuesday of September or the third Tuesday of September. And so the date was always changing. And so there was a push to put it on a single date, September 21st. And the UN was kind of slow to make that happen. And so technically speaking, in 2001, the opening session of the General Assembly was actually scheduled for September 11th of 2001. So that was the International Day of Peace. And then from 2002 on, it was on September 21st. So we looked at that, we the world looked at that, and we said, let's use that movement of the International Day of Peace from September 11th to September 21st. We call that 11 Days of Global Unity, from September 11th through September 21st. And we launched it in 2004. It took like a year and a half to organize the launch. We had events in 125 cities. Desmond Tutu made a special video for it. Jane Goodall was an honorary co-chair, along with Marianne Williamson, and a long list of people, the Secretary General of Amnesty International, and then it continued. So we did that every year, and it's been expanding every year. So we've had as many as over 800 associated events in 60 countries with 11 Days of Global Unity. And then growing out of 11 days has been 11 themes for change, which have developed into 11 campaigns for change. And I'll just mention what they are so you get a sense of the comprehensive scope of what we're working on here. So theme number 1 is unity, and there's interdependence, environment, economic justice, health, children and youth, women, human rights, freedom, disarmament, and peace. And over 600 organizations have signed up specifically to work on one or more of these campaigns. So the idea is that by working through these various areas, these campaigns, that's part of this We campaign. And the idea is to foster the shift in consciousness towards we and the common good as we're actually taking steps to work for some of these, to make these things happen, like disarmament, abolishing nuclear weapons, reducing weapons sales, and small arms trade, but in each of these areas. So that's kind of the big picture, and people can actually get involved. If you have an organization, you're watching this now, and you want to tie in your organization with one or more of these 11 campaigns for change, you can go to we.net and sign up your organization. Your organization will be placed on a directory of organizations, and there you can also see all the different groups that are working within each of these 11 themes. And by the way, the 11 themes do support the Sustainable Development goals. And we've been, working kind of with, we're part of some of the meetings that help to develop the Sustainable Development Goals. I guess our feeling is that if we don't bring together these change makers in these large enough, numbers to create a critical mass and a tipping point, then we can't really make these things happen. I don't think we can end poverty or end war or end climate, the climate disruption that's going on and the mass extinction of species. I think we have to get on the first page, on the same page, right? Which maybe is the first page, and then come together so that we can address the systemic obstacles that we find, which have to do with things like the military-industrial complex and all of the concentrations of wealth and power that are trying to keep the status quo going. So it's those things that we're working on. We invite everyone to be part of it.
Thank you. And anybody watching now live or that will be watching in the future, I just want to remind you that this is open to anybody, all genders, all creeds, all nationalities, and this is not for one organization. This is for the global community. And during your celebration, Rick, you had international dancers, you had musicians, you had videos with these international icons of holding their voices as anchors for peace. And I just wanted to say how remarkable it is and how important it is to have that as a standard for inclusivity. And from our city, from New York City, to across the country, to the other side of the planet.
Exactly. I think that international focus is really important, and it kind of, if we can expand those circles of empathy to include everyone on the planet, and like I said, the entire web of life as well, not just humans, then that kind of takes it away from this concept of partisanship and Democrats and Republicans, and all of that. It kind of pales by comparison. I mean, for me, growing up, I was very influenced by science fiction, and that was a good way for me to adopt these kind of international attitudes. Because if you're reading stories that are based in places millions of light years away from Earth and millions of years in the future or in the past, the tiny, it seems very provincial to think about, Democrats and Republicans as being like, it just looks very kind of puny.
I think we need to also acknowledge that it's not just partisanship here in the United States. It's ethno-nationalism around the world. Donald Trump, when he spoke to the UN General Assembly, said that he was against globalism, against multilateral cooperation, and that he was a patriot and he was a nationalist. And he's not the only one. Viktor Orban in Hungary, Poland is getting this way. India has some tendencies. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees just reminded India of its obligations to the Rohingya refugees that are coming into India, and that they should not and be expelled, and that India has obligations to those refugees. The Philippines, I mean, I could go on and on and on. There's a rise in nationalism And being a student of history myself, it reminds me of the 1930s when there was also a rise in nationalism in Germany, in Italy, in Spain, in Japan, and other countries, and that led to World War II. I hope we're not going in that direction. But what happened after World War II with the formation of the United Nations was an interconnected web of mutual trade and cooperation and communication, and a lot of treaties which bind us all together as one globe for peace and for development and for dealing with problems like Ebola crisis, epidemics, all sorts of things. And that web of international cooperation is beginning to fray. And you've got the rise of nationalistic leaders, and that's disturbing. And I think all of us should do everything we can to remind our leaders that it is this web of international cooperation that protects us and sustains us and helps us develop and create better lives for everybody.
I couldn't agree more. And I feel that some of these politicians are using things like insecurity, in economic insecurity, to heighten this sense like, oh, there are certain people who are to blame for this, like the other, whoever that happens to be. And that feeds into this nationalistic concept, right? So, and I agree that it's important. And that's why getting this idea out there of we and coming together is so essential. Now, one thing I wanted to point out is that there are new voices that are emerging that may be able to have influence in high places that the normal voices of activists and others, the professional people in NGOs may not have. And the reason I'm mentioning, or what I'm talking about, is the voices of children. And so, Brandon, there's a video I wanted to see if you can play also. It's a project called An Urgent Message from Your Children. And it was started by someone named Carol Hart, who was one of the people that helped to launch Sesame Street. And she's been a long time partner and supporter of We the World. And she came to us and we put together this project, An Urgent Message from Your Children, at weyourchildren.org. And it's a really exciting project to get the voices of children out there. And so you'll see with this video, children 12 years old and younger expressing their fears, their concerns, and their hopes for the future of the planet, especially regarding the environment. And it's also an invitation to other kids to make their own videos. Are you able to show that, Brandon?
Yes, I have it right up. It's coming in just one moment. Thank you, Rick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Attention! Attention! Can I have your attention, please? It's urgent! Urgent! It's urgent! This is an urgent message from your children! I feel really scared. The environment is kind of getting torn apart. There's pollution, global warming, and people are just not caring about it. Nature is getting destroyed. I mean, there's a bunch of logging, there's water pollution, there's air pollution. I'm really concerned about the fact that we don't have no good water to drink. Pipelines, the
gas inside, they can also explode.
And some people are throwing garbage in the ocean that makes the ocean polluted. So animals are also getting sick and can die. If animals are getting extinct, one day we're gonna get extinct if we don't stop. This makes me feel mad. It makes me feel upset. I think it's terrible. I feel ashamed because so far very few people are doing something about it. It will be sad because we don't have anywhere else to live.
I'm worried that this generation will be ruined and there will be nothing left for the next generation.
If this keeps going, well, the whole world is really going to collapse.
Just give me a minute, please. If we don't stop this, it will lead to a global disaster, or even the destruction of Earth.
If we destroy all of this, then we'll have no other planet to live on. People act like it's nothing and it won't affect them, but soon it will.
Sometime in the future, I may be dead, I may not. It's going to affect us all in some horrible way. And so if we do something now, then maybe we can stop that from happening.
I would want to do something about it, though the people who really have that power don't really care.
It's not like there's an unstoppable force doing this to us. We can choose not to, do this to the planet and the environment.
I want to live in a world where children can look out the window and not see a sea of sadness, but somewhere where things thrive.
We're probably gonna have to, evolve.
Hey kids! Hey kids! Want to help us get the word out? Will you join us? Go to weyourchildren.org.
BeYourChildren.org.
And upload your own video.
Upload your own video. Add your voice.
Tell your adults how you feel. Tell your adults how you feel. Tell your adults how you feel.
And tell your friends to join us too.
If we can get 1 million kids.
1 million kids!
To add their voice.
Then grown-ups will have to listen.
The grown-ups will have to listen.
Go to weyourchildren.org.
Weyourchildren.org.
We are your children.
We are your children.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Rick. One of my like I said earlier, my first encounter directly with the United Nations was in high school. I was lucky enough to join a conflict resolution class where we had, and especially for me when I was in just a place of conflict in my own development, we discussed every day effective communication and workshops and how to talk to the other from us and realize really that the other is just something in our mind, and it's just something that we need to communicate to. And as I watched everybody in my high school class, which could be freshmen from high school, which is not so removed from middle school, to seniors about to graduate, it just bridged our connectedness. And that class was led by who's now a colleague of ours, George Anthony, who's a NGO representative for Pathways to Peace, and he brought us to the United Nations for the International Day of Peace. And that year, there was great construction going on campus, so the building that we were in actually isn't there anymore. But seeing all these celebrities, Jane Goodall, who's been there every year, or at least sent a video message if she was abroad at the time, and she is so dedicated to youth, and her Roots for Shoots program, which is coordinated with us directly via our other colleague, Sean Sweeney. how they engage creative projects in education and intercultural dialogue between anybody who wants to speak to all the children that want to listen is puts the future at just such a positive baseline, so it's such a neutral ground in what it really means to understand and what it means to bridge communication. And that was so important. Thank you for sharing that with us, Rick.
Yeah, and the you know, we worked closely with Jane. It's through our partnership with Jane Goodall and the Jane Goodall Institute and Roots and Shoots. They helped introduce us to some of the those kids who are on the screen. Like not all of them, but you know, maybe a third of them or so.
Thanks so much. Sorry, go ahead.
It's a wonderful video. It's absolutely inspiring. It made me think again of my experiences in West Africa and the need to preserve our forests and animal species. Again, I was in a refugee situation in Liberia. I saw towns with smoke coming up from them where they'd been destroyed, and streams of refugees coming out of these towns. At the same time that this was going on, I saw logging trucks bringing down old growth trees, huge trees, from the forests of Liberia to the port in Monrovia for shipment to Europe. I also saw this in Cote d'Ivoire, where I lived, and the people there have traditional beliefs in sacred forests, that certain forests are sacred and the trees should not be cut. Christian and Muslim missionaries came in and said, well, that's superstitious nonsense. You should cut down the trees and cultivate the land and grow crops. So in Cote d'Ivoire, that's what they did. And now what used to be a tropical rainforest, now they have droughts because they don't have the trees. And some of these indigenous beliefs, these beliefs in sacred forests and sacred places, and you know, it's all about preservation of the world as it is. And to poo-poo and to ridicule traditional beliefs is I think a huge mistake. And some of these beliefs of indigenous peoples are beliefs we should all embrace, that trees are sacred and animals are sacred and habitats are sacred, and we need to protect them.
I agree. Indigenous wisdom has allowed indigenous peoples to live in harmony with the planet for millennia, for you know, longer, I guess, than the so-called civilization or civilized peoples, and we're ignoring very often that wisdom, like you were saying.
Well, Winona LaDuke is an indigenous leader from Minnesota, just one of fabulous. She actually ran on the Green Party as a vice presidential candidate at one point. And she often says, she comes to the United Nations quite a bit. And she says, you know, these nations that are at the United Nations, some of them have only been nations for 50 years or 60 years. And we, the indigenous peoples of the world, we have been peoples and nations for thousands of years, for millennia. And we don't have a seat in the United Nations. And these nations that have only been nations for 50 or 60 years, or even America for 250 years, I mean, that's tiny amounts of time compared to the length of time that indigenous nations have been on the earth.
Exactly. And, you know, that's part of this concept of expanding our sense of what we is, because if that expands to forests and ecosystems, like if you go to we.net, you'll see there are these rotating pictures at the top there, and they're not just people, children of all kinds from around the world, but you'll see dolphins and you'll see lions and rivers and forests and mountains. So it's really expanding that concept.
There was a story on NPR this morning about the Mekong River and the Mekong Delta in Vietnam. The Chinese are actually building a lot of dams on the Mekong River. The Mekong River is one of the few places on Earth where they have freshwater dolphins. And these dams that are being built are destroying the dolphin population, the fish population. Communities that depend on aquaculture are afraid that they will no longer be able to eat. The reporter said, yeah, but you're getting hydroelectric power, you're getting electricity. And one of these fishermen says, I can't eat electricity, you know? So we need to think of these things.
Exactly, exactly.
We're just about approaching the final leg of this episode. I want to say again, if anybody's viewing right now and would like to ask a question, please feel free to address myself or the panelists via the chat box to the bottom or to the side of your screen. And yeah, I wanted to note back to the youth that there are so many. Internationally, there are so many global movements that are vibrating with youth participation due to exposure and reflection on intense incidences of violence. We have Malala, who's been involved at the United Nations. We have all the student survivors from Parkland, Florida, which has been such huge voices in gun ownership issues facing the country. And David Hogg and Emma Gonzalez were two real predominant figures in that movement, and they were going to come to the United Nations for the International Day of Peace student observation, which was unfortunately canceled due to the memorial for former Secretary General Kofi Annan. But I just wanted to put out that there are so many voices that feel muted right now. So many voices that are feeling silenced from people of color, from women, from LGBTQ plus community, to anybody really wanting to create and feel, what's the point in creating? I can't tell personally how many times that I've just seen something by accident or had a conversation with somebody that I didn't mean to, that sparked my next day for creativity. And that's really all I could hope for these kinds of programs, at least for myself, and as someone who can offer to share my world with other people, So I just wanted to say thank you to Bruce and to Rick for sharing their experiences, and not just with myself or our direct community, but with leaving your experiences available to anybody from any background to learn from and to grow from.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm so glad you also mentioned the LGBTQ community. I'm a gay man myself, and I am married to the most wonderful man in the world. He's an African American. He works in show production. Today, he's at the Kennedy Center working on a TV show at the Kennedy Center. And there are so many marginalized people. We've mentioned Indigenous people, LGBTQ people, trans women of color, all kinds of people that are ignored and not heard. I've been very proud to bring trans women to the UN, and to talk even directly to the High Commissioner for Human Rights. I think we all should do what we can to make sure that the people that live in the shadows, whose voices are not heard, that they get a chance to be heard. And I know that the We campaign is doing that as well. And I think all of us, we need to help amplify these voices and give a platform for people to be heard.
Definitely. And I will maybe leave you with something that a dear friend of ours said, like a little quote. Is that okay, Brandon?
Please, sure, yes.
So Jonathan Granoff, who is the president of the Global Security Institute, and he's also an advisory board member of We the World, and he won. He didn't win. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2014. So he gave a talk at the launch of our We campaign years ago, and at the end of his talk, he said, "I hope we expands so much that there is no longer any them." So I thought that fit perfectly, and he said it just came to him in that moment. But it's almost like a slogan that we've adopted now.
Thank you so much.
Amen to that.
Absolutely. I think we're all on board with that. And so we're about at that time, and I just wanted to close with this, not a prayer, not coming from any creed, but a message of hope that spread throughout the entire planet, that came out of Japan, actually, from World War II, for those who are watching that may not be aware. And that message is simply, may peace prevail on earth. And can we all say that together? Can we share this message across the planet together? May peace
prevail on earth.
On earth.
Bruce Knotts, Rick Ulfik, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you.